Chapter 1001. In the past, Ethan and Olivia would intertwine their fingers whenever they were in the heat of the moment. A person could change his face with a mask, face a change in the aura, and fake the glint in his gaze through practice. However, they could never change the size of their hands. How could Ethan forget about the feeling of holding Olivia's hand when he had held it so many times? Her hand fit in his so perfectly. Unlike the smooth skin before this, her hands grew calluses. She had it rough for the past few years. She suddenly shook his hand off. Guilt tinged his expression. Sorry for crossing the line. I was thinking about my ex-wife. She stared at his face, realizing that there was no huge change in his expression. Even his eyes lost their sparks. She reckoned that it was simply her being paranoid. It's all right. What's happening to me? It could be a side effect because of the heavy medicine dosage. I'll reduce the dosage from today onward and make new medicines. You should visit the spring at the back of the mountain often. It's good for your health. I'll make something nourishing for you before checking your pulse later. Thank you. Ethan shut his eyes in bed, appearing evidently weak. Olivia hurriedly went out of the room to catch a chicken from the coop and pick some mushrooms and ingredients for the medicine. After cleaning the chicken, she stewed it alongside other ingredients to make a pot of porridge. Ethan needed something nourishing, but the meal shouldn't be too heavy. Thus, she had to control the amount of ingredients she added. On the other hand, Ethan requested Brent's presence after she left the room. Mr. Miller, did you ask for me? It's not time to take medicine yet, though. Ethan nodded. Close the door. Make sure there's no one around before coming into the room. Okay. Brent was more reliable than Kelvin. After doing as Ethan told him, he came to Ethan and lowered his voice. Done. Is there something I have to do, Mr. Miller? Ethan said in an undertone next to Brent's ear. I want to know exactly how old Willow is. Ask the people around. Why are you suddenly asking about her? Just do as I say. Do it secretly. No one must find out about this. Ethan didn't explain much about it. Yes, sir. Despite finding it strange, Kelvin accepted the orders without complaints. After all, Ethan's orders were everything. Ethan didn't feed Brent the reason behind it because Olivia was smart. If Brent were to investigate Olivia, it might alarm her. Thus, it was their best option to act naturally. Ethan lay in bed, thinking how good it would be if the doctor were really Olivia. Realizing that she had been following up on news about him, he thought, she doesn't want to give up saving me. Does that mean she still cares for me dearly? Besides, they had another child. It was no wonder he felt the attachment toward Willow. It was possible that she had recognized him, which explained why she was willing to donate her blood to him. Silly kid. I really want to see her. What a shame, he said to himself in his head. His good mood helped him recover faster. Ethan was even willing to take the medicine. Olivia brought the porridge over. You have to take some even if your stomach doesn't feel well. Take it slow. It's porridge. He nodded, giving his full cooperation. Okay. This is a bowl. Be careful. Thank you. He reached out to take the bowl. There was a spoon in the bowl because she figured that he could feed himself with it. As soon as she thought about that, the bowl fell onto the floor. She raised her head to see his innocent face. Sorry. He got out of bed to clean up the mess, and the fragment cut his finger. She quickly grabbed his hand. Don't move, let me do it. Chapter 1002. Grabbing Ethan's hand, Olivia checked his wound only to realize that there was a long line of slits adorning it. I'm fine. I get hurt often. It's nothing. Unbothered, he withdrew his hand. Give me a second. She quickly brought a medical kit over to stop the bleeding. All right. Make sure the wound stays away from water these 2 days. I'll help you to the bed. It's all right. You don't have to. He shoved her away before dragging his body toward the bed. Although he wanted to stay close to her, she was too smart for him to do that. It would take a single mistake for her to find out about it. Hence, he could only control his impulsive thoughts by pretending that they were strangers and distancing himself from her. Frowning, Olivia said, There's no man or woman here but a doctor and a patient. If you insist on distancing yourself from me, I won't care about the poison in your body anymore. Ethan hung his head low. Sorry. She brought over another bowl of porridge. If you wanna get better soon, do as I say. Sorry for the trouble, he apologized again. Olivia looked at the man, who was hanging his head low like a child at fault. In the past, Ethan had always been on the top with dominating power. When did he ever act this way? She let out a silent sigh. It's all right, I understand. Have some chicken soup. It took me long to make it. She was stunned for a moment at what she had said. In fact, there was no need for her to add the final sentence. It made it seem as if she genuinely cared for him. Some things were ingrained in her very bones as habits before she realized it. She still practiced that after so many years had passed. I've added some herbs so that you'll feel better soon, she added. Thank you. Olivia fed him as silence dawned upon them. The atmosphere could never be any more wholesome than it was right now. On the day she left his side, she had thought of avoiding him for the rest of her life. She didn't want to see him forever. When she had free time, she would imagine how their reunion would be if it were inevitable. Everything that was happening right now was beyond her imagination. Ethan turned from a cold person into an obedient person. He put up with the discomfort of interacting closely with others. Whether she was feeding him medicine or food, he would give her full cooperation. He didn't cause her trouble. Perhaps he was trying his best to get back to his feet soon. Since Ethan felt very uncomfortable today, Olivia had to stay to observe him. That way, she could decide whether to add, reduce, or change the ingredients for his medicine. There were still poisonous remnants in his body, so she couldn't afford to be careless. She thought, the heavy dosage of medicine could be the reason for him feeling uncomfortable. But if I reduce the medicine, it might not be enough to keep the poison under control. I guess I should use the traditional way. Let's go. We can continue it in the cave. This is the only way to minimize the side effects, as well as the fastest way to remove the poison from you. I'll do as you say. Ethan asked for Brent to prepare to return to the cave. Right then, Calvin barged into the room and bowed at Olivia. Miss, please check on Crystal. I know her bitchy attitude has offended you, but she's gravely ill right now. If something happens to her, I'll be doomed. He had the nerve to speak ill of Crystal only when she was not around. A cold glint flashed across Olivia's eyes as she wondered what kind of background Crystal had. Calvin and Brent were afraid of Crystal. Crystal's family was considered as a family with a middle income in Aldenvine. Supposedly, they weren't someone to gain this much respect from the duo. Only then did Ethan ask indifferently, what happened to her, Mr. Miller? She ran away angrily after you said those words yesterday. Then, I brought her back, and she fell sick. She couldn't even get out of the bed. Calvin didn't dare to mention Willow's incident in front of Olivia. Ethan frowned. Ask someone to send her back to Aldenvine. Someone will treat her there. Chapter 1003. Ethan perceived Crystal as a younger sister. He tried his best to look after her whenever he could. He saved her by chance that year, but she ended up pestering him. In the past, she insisted on going with him for his missions. He assumed that the young lady yearned for real-life experience to prepare herself for promotion. On top of that, she indeed donated her blood to him during emergencies. Thus, he intended to help her out. As she grew older, her feelings for him became more apparent. That was why he told her that he was married, and she stopped pestering him for a few years. However, she became eager in his pursuit again ever since the mind-blowing news of his divorce. No matter how Ethan rejected Crystal, she tagged along. His patience slowly ran thin at her attempts. Now, he wouldn't care about their mentor-mentee relationship anymore. Brent quickly said, Mr. Miller, she's seriously ill. If we don't have her treated immediately and send her back instead, if the superiors wanna find fault in someone, it'll do no good to you. Ethan replied coldly, she had it coming. Don't be bothered by it. Then, he stood up to head outside. The visually impaired man almost tripped by the door, but Olivia managed to hold him. This house is smaller than your mansions. If you're not familiar with it, don't wander around mindlessly. What if you fall off the stairs? I have to treat your broken bones then. Sorry, I'm not that petty to be angry with you when you can't even see. Slow down. She guided him while holding his hand. Brent stared at their holding hands, which reminded him of Ethan's orders. Brent soon comprehended something. Unobtrusively, he smiled for a second. When she looked at him, he was already wearing a concerned expression. She wondered if it was her delusion. Meanwhile, Kelvin was still pleading, "Miss, what if something happens to him? I'll be sentenced to death. I'm still young, and I haven't found myself a wife yet." She replied without looking back, "She'll get better after sleeping for a few days." She guessed in her head, "It seems like Crystal has a strong background. If something happens to her, Ethan will be dragged into the problem." Still, Olivia kept her expression stoic as she led Ethan to the back of the mountain. The warm breeze caressed their cheeks, bringing the flowery scent to their noses. The birds were chirping while the stream flowed steadily. The crease between Ethan's brows slowly smoothened out. He initiated a conversation, "It must be pretty here." "It's not bad. Too bad I can't see them. Your eyeballs are affected by the poison. Your retina and cornea are seriously damaged. You gotta be mentally prepared that it might take up a lot of time for them to recover." Her remarks embittered him. "If so, it'll be troublesome. Why, Kelvin and Brent are my right-hand men. Now that I'm in trouble, I bet it's a whole mess out there. I need them to handle some matters in my stead. If they always stay here, I might not be able to see progress in my work." Olivia was aware of how important the duo were to him. Words of Ethan getting poisoned had gotten out. Perhaps the other parties were waiting for an answer to all of this. Yet, there was nothing he could do in such a state. "You should stay for the detox. It's safe here. No one will hurt you. I can't see. Once they're gone, it'll cause you a lot of trouble." "This is nothing. I'm a doctor." She calculated the days, concluding that the detox would take up about 20 days at most. When the final day came, he could return to his place and take a break for recovery. It wouldn't be much trouble for her. At the same time, she didn't notice the corner of his lips curling upward. Chapter 1004. Before Ethan entered the cave, he told Brent, "You heard it, didn't you? I have to stay for the detox. Bring some men with you and handle the chaos out there. Since there's nothing serious about Crystal, send her back too." The corner of Brent's lips twitched at how Ethan abandoned his brothers the moment he found Olivia. Ethan was trying to drive them away so that he could spend time alone with her. "Okay, Mr. Miller, Cyril shall stay as the messenger." There was no network in the village. The villagers used pigeons to pass letters to keep in touch with people. "Okay, go ahead. Do not tell anyone about my whereabouts." "Got it." In the name of work matters, Ethan made sure others wouldn't disturb his moment of reunion with Olivia. Nevertheless, it would really be good news if the couple could reconcile. The sensible Brent left the area instantly. When Olivia was boiling the water, she realized that he had driven the others away too quickly. Now that Brent was gone, who was going to remove Ethan's clothes? She couldn't pass a message to Cyril through a bird like Willow did, either. Olivia convinced herself in her head, "Fine. I'm a professional. He's just a normal patient. Take your clothes off. You turn around." The show had to go on. Crossing her arms, she tilted her head. "Do you think I wish to see your body?" "It's meh." She heard him muttering behind her. "It's more than meh." Her face turned crimson instantly as she thought, "This pervert. Does he treat every woman this way?" "Done," he reminded her. Previously, Brent had always been the person guiding Ethan. Now that Brent was away, she had to take it upon herself. Olivia tried her best not to look at him. "Give me your hand." Holding his hand, she guided him with the way. He didn't do anything that crossed the line. After that, he got into the bathtub obediently. It was difficult to remain in the bathtub. Before this, he pulled through without complaints. But now that he was aware of Olivia's presence, he was willing to take pleasure in it. She didn't know what was on his mind at all. She found some herbs nearby and mashed them to collect their juice, which were ingredients to treat his eyes. Ethan stayed in the water for an hour before Olivia came over to remind him to get out of there. Steam was rising from his body. Holding her hand, he stepped down the stairs slowly. She led him to the rim of the spring. "Stay in the water a little longer. Your robe is here." "Thank you." He quickly withdrew his hand as though she was some sort of a monster. Although she knew that he didn't like touching others, his actions made her uncomfortable. She crouched by the spring while holding the bowl of juice. "Come here." He swam toward her. "Close your eyes. I'm going to apply medicine to you." Ethan rested his arms on the rim of the spring, whereas Olivia knelt on the ground and leaned slightly forward. Her long hair flowed over her shoulders, brushing his collarbones. The closer she was to him, the more obvious the woody scent was. He was confident that this doctor was the woman from that day. Meanwhile, the oblivious Olivia reminded him softly, "It's kinda cold. Hold on. It's all right." She smeared the juice on his eyelids with a wooden stick before bandaging his eyes. The bandage that covered his eyes softened his features. "I could still make out the outline of an object before this, but I can't see anything now. Once you recover, you can see anything you want." He suddenly blurted, "The person I wanna see the most is you." Chapter 1005. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Ethan added, "Had it not been for you, I would have lost my life. You're my savior, and I'm genuinely grateful to you. Once I recover, I will surely repay this favor." For some reason, she imagined a story of a hero saving a maiden in distress, in which the maiden would repay the favor by marrying the hero. Olivia and Ethan had divorced years ago, and they had drawn the line that they wouldn't intervene in each other's lives anymore. Yet, an ambiguous emotion stirred in her at the idea of him marrying another woman. Perhaps it was her unwillingness to accept her defeat. Ethan was the man she had loved since her school days. She had imagined building a big family and growing old with him countless times. During their newlywed days, her eyes were always on him as he owned all of her heart. At that time, she had never thought that their marriage would fail one day and that someone else would stand by his side. Still, reality would always hit at the most unexpected moments. Olivia tried her best not to be swayed by him. Her voice was indifferent. "How are you going to repay me?" "That's up to you. What do you want?" he questioned back. Connor was the first person she thought of. She wondered if he would give her the boy's custody if she asked for it. "I'll come up to you to claim what I want in the future. Judging from your accent, you must be from Arlandia. What's your name?" He didn't expose her. "You can call me Vanessa. If you didn't grow up in Arlandia, you wouldn't have been able to speak the language this fluently. I don't think this is your real name, is it?" Olivia was annoyed for some reason. "Why are you digging into my information, Mr. Miller? Are you going for a cliché? Will you marry me to repay my favor? If I'm going to do that, that is still on the condition that you're willing to do so." She thought, "I guess it's all bullshit when he told me that I'm the only person he loves. He's a playboy. I bet he has flirted with a lot of women while I'm gone." The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. "Don't worry, I'd rather marry a pig than you." She turned and left in frustration. She even waved the fan in her hand stronger. Noticing Olivia's displeasure, he smiled instead of getting angry. He thought, "I knew you'd still love me, Liv. How could you give up on someone that you've loved so deeply before?" However, soon, Ethan couldn't find himself smiling anymore. Even though she hadn't forgotten about him, way too many things happened between them and separated them. The abyss of problems rendered it impossible for her to approach him anymore. He sighed deeply. Olivia watched the fire while contemplating if she should make his condition worse as a punishment for flirting with women. By the time she calmed down, she figured that she was being childish. She didn't have the right to intervene in whoever Ethan interacted with anyway. She had gone missing for more than 3 years, so he might have assumed that she was dead. He couldn't possibly become a widower for her, could he? She thought. Things broke into pieces to fall back into their places in reality. That was how life worked. The sound of water splashing resounded behind her. Worrying that something might happen to Ethan, Olivia quickly looked back, only to see him getting out of the spring. He was clad in the robe as his fingers fiddled with the belt. Then, he realized that it didn't come with a belt. She looked at the belt, which was placed nearby. Since he couldn't see, she admitted her fate and put her fan down. She picked it up from the ground. Olivia reckoned that he wouldn't be able to tie it properly due to his eyesight, hence the unfriendly tone. "Don't move." He stood at his place and spread his arms, and she wrapped the belt around his waist. The water droplets traveled along his chest before vanishing between his abs. The sight caused her to blush as she hurriedly tied it for him. He was so nervous that he didn't dare to breathe loudly. Given the distance, he could hug her if he withdrew his arms. Chapter 1006. Olivia tied the belt into a knot with quick movements. Done. Then, she pulled it to lead him to the animal's skin so that he could lie down. Rest up. You can eat later to replenish. Judging from how the cave was filled with necessities, he figured that she frequently lived here. He thought, did she recover from her illness here? How did she raise the kid alone all this time? There were so many questions in his head, but he didn't dare to rush his plans. One day, the mystery would be solved. Not long after he lay down, he heard the sound of a bell ringing. He held his breath. It was Willow. Although he didn't know her birth date yet, he had already seen her as his daughter. He didn't move, and the sound of the bell got louder and louder. In the end, it stopped right next to him. Then, she caressed his face. His heart raced as he thought, she already knows that I'm her father, right? Ethan didn't want to interrupt such a wonderful moment. Soon, Willow withdrew her hand. It seemed like she had gone to Olivia's side. Are you hungry? Olivia lowered her voice, which was quite similar to her original voice. Willow made a gesture, eliciting a soft chuckle from Olivia. Olivia said, okay, you prepare the ingredients. I'll teach you how to make candies later. The sound of the bell ringing disappeared, but Willow sounded happy. Suddenly, Ethan sensed something getting closer to him. It wasn't a person. An animal seemed to be sniffing his hand. His heart surged up to his throat as he wondered if it was a beast. Olivia reassured him, relax. It's a baby deer. There are deers. Yeah, there's a stream nearby. A lot of little animals would come over for a drink. Are there wild beasts around here? A scene flashed across her mind. There was, but not anymore. After the leopard died, all the beasts escaped deeper into the mountains. They never appeared before Olivia again. Ethan, who didn't know the reason behind it, found it amusing. Animals were spiritual beings. When he was out in the wild, little animals could sense the murderous aura around him and distance themselves from him. Unlike the baby deer, which even licked his hand. It was weird. The sound of the bell ringing came closer. Olivia had prepared the ingredients for making candies. The smell of burnt marshmallows wafted into Ethan's nose. Willow slid one candy onto his hand. Is this for me? He asked. She answered the question by ringing her bell. He stroked her head. Thank you. Willow was happy. Noticing that he wasn't going to eat it, she patted the back of his hand. It was a distinct conversation between a visually impaired person and a dumb. Olivia couldn't bring herself to let them be as she urged. Willow is asking you to eat it. It's freshly made. Can I eat candies? It won't hurt to eat one or two. Ethan ate it. Sweetness and sourness filled his mouth, reminding him of the past. A long time ago, before he went out, he asked, Liv, is there any present you want? Olivia replied, fruits. He tapped the tip of her nose. Okay. Then, he brought home a bunch of fresh fruits. Wearing an apron, she promised him that she would make him candies. In the end, the kitchen turned into a mess instead. The candy syrup was black in color and tasted bitter. She held the failed product in disappointment, and yet, he took a candy. A smile adorned his lips. It's sweet. Likewise, it reminded Olivia of the past too. The expression on Ethan's face was the same as before. Chapter 1007. Ethan looked in Olivia's direction. He couldn't see because of the bandage, but her heart palpitated nevertheless. She stood up to place the candies into a basket. I'm going to bring some to Wendy. Could you look after him? Willow nodded, and Olivia left. Willow sat next to Ethan while patting the baby deer's head. Sometimes, it accidentally bumped into the man. He had a feeling that they were playing around. He should be happy about it, but he realized something. The candy he ate was made of apples that couldn't be found in the area. Where did they obtain apples from? There was only one possibility. Someone else brought it from outside the village. It must be Jack, he thought. So many years had passed. No one knew how Olivia was getting along with Jack. While Ethan wasn't by her side, another man was replacing his place. Uneasiness crept into his heart. Willow, who sensed his emotions, grabbed his hand to write a few words. "What's wrong, Willow? I'm kinda bored here. Could you take me around the area?" He couldn't say his concern aloud. She knew that he had finished his medication for the day. Figuring that a light exercise would do good to him, she nodded. She held his hand, becoming his guide. Never in Ethan's wildest dream had he imagined his interaction with his daughter to be this way. Her little hand held his, giving him reassurance. He held her hand carefully, not wanting to hurt her. At that moment, he felt like he owned the whole world. Power and authority couldn't be compared with the feeling of holding Willow's hand. As the sun setting, the sound of the bell ringing was calm, which indicated a positive answer to that question. "Where is your mother?" he questioned again. My eyes suddenly hurt. As he had expected, Willow led Ethan to where Olivia was. Since he couldn't see, he walked along the rough road slowly. Still, he was anxious on the inside. Anyone in his shoes would feel the same way. Who wouldn't be anxious when his wife was running away with another man? Before he went close to Olivia, he could hear a man, thanks to his good hearing. "Olivia, it's been a while. Did you miss me?" It was a foreign voice. If it wasn't Jack, who could it be? Judging from the way of speaking, Ethan could only think of a person. He was confident that it was him. Back when he first met Colin, the latter was just a young man with a brisk voice. Now, Colin had turned into a real man after those years. Even his voice sounded mature. Colin posed more of a threat to Ethan than Jack did. Ethan was on the edge, wondering how Olivia would answer that. "How could you still be this greasy when you've grown this old?" She sounded happy. "That's because I miss you, Olivia. How about our old ritual tonight? It's been so long." Tonight's a no-no," she refused without a second thought. "I have a patient. How can a patient be more important than I am?" Colin was literally a fox. Ethan gnashed his teeth so hard that they almost fell. He thought, what is there that has to be done at night? He had mentally prepared himself for the possibility of Olivia falling in love with someone else. However, when it was time to really face it, Ethan felt his heart break and sink into an abyss of immense coldness. He thought, was this how she felt when I didn't explain my relationship with Marina? I was such a bastard. Chapter 1008. The sheer idea of Olivia lying beneath another man got his hackles up. The urge to kill Colin was bubbling in him. Willow's ringing bell drew Olivia and Colin's attention. Joyfully, he ran toward Willow. The smile on his face stiffened the moment he noticed the man standing next to her. He pointed at Ethan while asking Olivia, "Is this your patient?" "Yeah, it's a long story." Olivia winked at Colin, hinting at him not to say much. Ethan figured that he should act until the end. "Are you having a guest, Vanessa?" Colin laughed. "Should I point out who's actually the guest here? You seem to hold a grudge against me. Do we know each other?" Ethan feigned innocence. Olivia coldly interrupted their conversation. "No. What brings you here?" Willow gestured to indicate what had happened. Olivia looked at Ethan. "Your eyes hurt." "Yeah, they suddenly hurt after you left. That's why I asked Willow to bring me to you." She frowned slightly. "Come with me." She took 2 steps away before recalling the fact that he couldn't see. Then, she turned to drag him away with her by pulling his robe belt. Their interaction provoked the murderous intent in Colin, who was watching them the whole time. They went to Olivia's room, where she ordered Ethan to sit down. He sat down meekly, and the wooden bed creaked. She stood in front of him to remove the bandage over his eyes. There were still stains of juice over his eyelids, so she wiped them off with a cloth for him. "Open your eyes." He did as she told him. "Can you see the light?" She waved her hand before him. Ethan shook his head. "I can only see the outline of the objects. Everything is blurry." He was telling the truth. He couldn't see clearly. Did they still hurt? "Yeah." She dripped another herbal juice into his eyes and blew his eyes softly. It cooled down the flaming pain in his eyes and cleared his mind a lot. Even his headache was staved off. The most fatal fact to him was the proximity between them. Ethan could even feel her body temperature. He gulped down his saliva as he clutched onto the bed sheet. He was afraid, afraid that he might not be able to rein himself in and do something impulsive. Olivia stopped after blowing at his eyes for 10 seconds. Do you feel better now? Much better. My head doesn't hurt either. Thanks. Hearing that, she heaved a sigh of relief. Do I have to return to the cave? You can go there tomorrow. It's enough for today. It's not like your eyes will recover in 2 or 3 days. Don't worry. Don't wander around at night. There are a lot of poisonous beings here. If you're bitten to death, I won't hold you responsible for it. Got it. He nodded and asked casually, was that your husband? Olivia stared at him for a while. Had it not been for his lifeless eyes and calm expression, she would have thought that it was a meaningful question. You don't have to know that. Rest up. She turned and left. Colin's appearance had completely ruined Ethan's mood. The old ritual at night mentioned by Colin kept echoing in Ethan's head. Ethan wondered if they were going to do something tonight. The bedsheet was wrinkled in his hands, and yet, he didn't realize it. Cyril hurried upstairs to report himself to Ethan as usual. Mr. Miller, is there anything you need? Murderous intent swallowed Ethan whole. Chapter 1009. Cyril could tell the change in Ethan's mood. Sensibly, Cyril closed the door before lowering his voice. Any orders, Mr. Miller? Ethan took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He suppressed his emotions to analyze the current situation. If there were a change in Olivia's relationship with Colin, it would be too late for Ethan to stop them right now. On the other side, if they didn't have sex, that meant that Colin had yet to win her heart. If that were the case, Colin would resent Ethan more than Ethan resented Colin. Therefore, Ethan shouldn't dig his own grave at such a crunch moment. It was best he figured out the duo's relationship first. Ethan cleared up his mind and whispered a few words into Cyril's ear. This is too dangerous, Mr. Miller. Cyril was obviously reluctant to do it. Do as I say. We need to sacrifice something in order to catch the wolf. Cyril couldn't follow Ethan. What did Ethan mean by catching the wolf? Ethan stayed in the room obediently while Cyril described the yard and surroundings to him. A simple map was drawn on Ethan's palm to give him a picture of the complicated descriptions. It was tough for an ordinary person to understand. But for someone as smart as Ethan, he was able to structure a map in his head. He familiarized himself with the room again. With calculations, he was clearly aware of the position and height of the objects in the room. Okay, take me outside. Cyril held his hand to bring him around the area. According to Cyril, Ethan learned that Olivia stayed in the house next door. The sky was getting dark. Wendy was making medicines in the yard. The men could hear her explaining the function of the herbs to Willow, too. Olivia and Colin weren't around. Ethan wondered, are they starting their night with their so-called ritual? Despite the anxiety scratching in him, he appeared calm. Noticing his slow movements, Wendy beckoned him over. Come over here, young man. Cyril introduced Wendy to Ethan. Mr. Miller, this is Madam Wendy. Although I've been here for days, this is my first time introducing myself officially to you, Madam Wendy. Thank you so much for saving me. Since she had guessed his identity right, he figured that it was better to be honest than to hide himself. Honesty was the best weapon that could be used. Wendy was Olivia's savior, and he genuinely respected her for that. You're nothing like that haughty brat. I heard that she's your fiancé, asked Wendy. She was testing him. Ethan hurriedly explained, I wasn't able to explain my relationship with her because I was poisoned before this. She's the daughter of my mentor and nothing else. From the way I see, that lady likes you a lot. Do you not have feelings for her at all? You must be joking. Flowers bloom every year. If every flower has to be appreciated and loved, I'm afraid I'll be much busier than I am right now. You hold yourself in high regard, huh? He said confidently, I'm merely stating the truth. One might be loving enough to reciprocate everyone's feelings for him, but that's what a bastard does. I'm an obsessive and selfish person. Once I fall in love with someone, my feelings for her will never change. You don't look young. You're married, aren't you? Since you're married, how can you let another woman pester you? I don't think your record is as clean as you claim it is. Cyril quickly explained, Miss Heath started pestering him only after Mr. Miller divorced. He rejected Miss Heath before, but she was too stubborn to give up on him. Mr. Miller only has his eyes on Mrs. Miller. Wendy smirked. If you loved her deeply, why did you divorce? Ultimately, it's because you didn't love her enough. Chapter 1010. Ethan hung his head low at Wendy's mockery. Willow raised her head to look at him, seemingly waiting for his answer. Previously, she didn't know a thing about her father. When Willow asked Olivia about him at times, she would gloss it over casually. Olivia wasn't willing to tell Willow anything about Ethan. Now, Willow had finally met him. This would be the first time she heard him speaking about Olivia. It seemed like the situation wasn't as she imagined it to be. Ethan loved Olivia. Madam Wendy, you can scold me for being a bastard in the past, hurting her so many times. But you can't doubt my love for her. Even if she has gone missing for many years, there isn't one day that I've forgotten about her. Colin chimed in. How hilarious, Mr. Miller. If you truly love her, as you said yourself, why did you hurt her? That's ironic. Ethan could hear Colin's footsteps getting louder. In the end, Colin placed his palm next to Ethan, leaning closer to Ethan. Colin emphasized, from the way I see, you're just a pretentious man. That's not love. If I love someone, I will shower her with love and care. I can never bring myself to hurt her. Do you think that I'm wrong, Mr. Miller? Ethan was aware that Colin was talking about Olivia. Whatever Ethan committed in the past was enough to put his name in the Hall of Shame. Even though he genuinely loved Olivia, everyone would only remember the bad deeds he had done. No matter what answer he gave to that question, he would be the losing party. Ethan's silence prompted Colin to continue. Mr. Miller, don't think that you can clean your name by putting in good words after hurting someone that deeply. There's no such thing in this world. Ethan tightened his fists. It hurt Ethan more because he knew who Colin was and what Colin was talking about. Still, he couldn't show a hint of anger on his face. He looked in Colin's direction with an alarmed expression instead. Who are you? Do you know me? Colin softly chuckled. How can I not know someone as famous as you are, Mr. Miller? I can't even list out the deeds you've done to your ex-wife. I don't know if you've forgotten about them, but they are memorable to me, let alone your ex-wife. I bet it's etched in her head. Olivia was just near Ethan, where a few lights were turned on in the vicinity. The image he saw was too surreal to be true. He couldn't sense her presence, and he wasn't angry at Colin's provocation. Looking at the air, Ethan softly responded, I didn't forget about them. I remember every single one of them vividly. And I regretted them. Colin sneered. Save these words for the Grim Reaper when you're sent to hell. Olivia let out a wry cough, hinting at him not to cross the line. Colin then said frivolously, enjoy the moon watching, Mr. Miller. I have something else to attend to. Bye. At that moment, Ethan hated the fact that he couldn't see so much. Agitation bubbled in him. Wendy placed a basket of peas in front of him. Since you feel better now, make yourself useful. You're a grown-up man. Don't whine like a kid and peel these peas. He was rendered speechless. How could he calm down and peel peas when his wife was running away? Cyril hurriedly said, Madam Wendy, he can't see. So, it might be inconvenient for him to do the job. Let me do it. Can a cripple like you do any better than a blind man, though? Now, it was Cyril's turn to go speechless. His leg was injured back when Olivia had a preterm delivery. Although he could walk, his gait was different from that of ordinary people. Don't take it upon yourself. I have something else for you to do. Collect the manure in the rear house to fertilize the vegetables tomorrow. Cyril glanced at Ethan, but I need to look after Mr. Miller. His hands and legs are perfectly attached to him. What is there that you need to look after him for? Hurry up. Go ahead. Ethan casually prompted. He thought that there was nothing complicated with peeling peas. His fingers fiddled around the peas, peeling their skins off. At the same time, he kept thinking about the fact that Olivia and Colin had left. Colin had his eyes on her for years ago, so he might seize the chance to take advantage of her.